Coming to you from the City of the Weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm.
Well, hello everybody, and happy Tuesday night. Chris Jordan here, coming at you live from Austin, Texas. We'll be on the road the next few weeks. Well, next week we're on the road. We're going to have a great pre-record from Daniel Jackson regarding spirit messages and archangel messages. We'll also be talking, at least as far as we know right now, it depends on Mike's schedule, but Mike Turber has updates regarding the sonic weapon technology used in the Venezuela attack on Maduro. So we will be getting some updates on that. We now have a name for that. Officially the discombobulator, as it's been called by our good president. So I love the fact that we have a very Marvin the Martian name for this device, the discombobulator. I think it's horrifying that we have such a weapon, but we'll be getting into some of that with Mike Turber, hopefully. And then we've got Barbara Schuessler coming on to talk about the founding of MUFON, as well as getting robots into space, all kinds of things. Jared Murphy, Ryan Edwards. We'll be having Scott Ertz on to talk about, the great memory shortage, folks, when it comes to AI and what that's going to do with AI. And tonight, I'm very, very happy to welcome in the second part, we've got Hakim Isler coming on to talk about an amazing class that he has coming up in Austin that is really first of its kind. I'm pretty involved in a lot of communities. I have never heard of a specified psychokinesis intensive weekend. So we will be talking with Hakim Isler about that. He's the founder of the Psy Games. We'll be talking about the history of psychokinesis, what this event is, and how it helps prepare people to be a perceptualist in the Psy Games. In our first segment, though, we are very, very happy to welcome back our good friend, as well as founder. Please welcome back to the show, everybody, San Francisco Bay Area architect Richard Gage, AIA, member of the American Institute of Architects and founder and former CEO of the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He now leads the charge for a new World Trade Center investigation, along with his courageous wife, Gail, at richardgage911.org. That is the website right there on your screen, folks. Welcome back to the show, the amazing Richard Gage. How are you doing this evening?
Hey, Chris, doing great. Feeling good. Ready to rock and roll and get some real interesting information to your viewers. This is critical stuff we're talking about today.
And, when I had the opportunity to interview you last year, not just at the 9/11 conference, but also individually, the data that you put out in your presentation, the presentation that you're literally about to give on air here, I love it because it's one of those, when you start looking at science, when you start approaching things from a scientific point of view, there are a lot of things that really begin to break down specifically with Building 7, things like that. So how did you first come to get involved with this movement, Richard? How did you first come to help found the Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth? And how do we get into this presentation and begin to give this to the average person?
Yeah, I was in shock. I was minding my own business, coming back from a construction observation meeting in Lafayette, California, where I worked. And I was listening to this interview by Bonnie Faulkner of Guns and Butter program on KPFA's local Pacifica radio station. She was interviewing David Ray Griffin, who had written now 14 books on the subject of the truth about 9/11. And he was talking about the explosive evidence that had just come out, been released well, August of 2005, the New York Times was suing the city of New York to get in a FOIA request all of this information, the testimonies of the 500 first responders that we're going to talk about today. And turns out 156 of them are talking about explosions many of them before the towers collapsed. So I'm going, what is this? I'd never heard any alternative theory as to how the towers collapsed. So I had to pull my van over in the parking lot of the gymnasium. I'm just going, whoa! I couldn't listen to this and drive at the same time. This information was coming in hard and fast, like ends of the beams dripping with molten metal. A third tower coming down on 9/11. I listened to that whole interview in the parking lot, and the guy was going to be interviewed, speaking the next night at the Grand Lake Theater in Oakland, California. So I had to go, and I went, and they were sold out. They wouldn't even let me in. They had 600 people in this theater. I had to go home and listen on the live stream. And I spent the next 2 weeks trying to disprove everything I just heard. And it flopped me over backwards. My state of cognitive dissonance was just turning. I couldn't hold on to the reality that I had, meaning that I proved to myself that we'd been lied to on a massive scale by the media, the government, that these buildings were blown up on purpose, that this is not the destruction of three buildings, which we didn't even hear about the third one, Building 7, which we're going to talk about first today. Yep. But then I took this information over the next couple of months and put it together in a PowerPoint, and took it to my architecture firm of 14 architects, in addition to myself, and bought them pizza, made them watch this. You guys got to see this, because previously to this, they thought, I was just like whackers. So some of them. And by the end of that 45-minute presentation, they all raised their hand. Yeah, you're right. These are controlled demolitions. We have to get a real investigation. So those are my first 14 architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth signed on to the petition, which is held at ae911truth.org.
And once again, the website is full, comprehensive. It's got so much stuff there. And folks, I know that this is a huge tender spot in our country, Richard. And even at the conferences last year, that's what I kept saying, is in 2026, coming up on the 25th reunion, or not reunion, but the 25th anniversary of this horrible event, I think that there are a lot of people who are finally open enough to hear some of this data. Because it took a long time, much like it took like a good 20 years after Vietnam for people to accept a lot of the horrible things that happened in Vietnam, and a lot of the ways that the government did horrible stuff with the military, things like that. Those things didn't come out till a long time later and accepted much later. So I think that we are at a point right now where people are open to a lot of different things. And I'm just here to tell you folks, I was not a convert to this stuff until the last few years. I have always said that something horrible, something nefarious happened. At the very least, there was some sort of Pearl Harbor-esque situation where they knew something was bound to happen and they did nothing for the means by which to go to war. But when you start looking at this data, when you start looking at this with an open mind, and when you start looking at it with a scientific aspect, it gets disturbing, and it gets disturbing pretty quick, Richard. And I want to warn people about that, but I also want to remind our audience that we come at these topics with full and open hearts and minds, because we have to be willing to doubt what we've seen and believed. You doubted what you saw and believed when you came to these truths, Richard. you know? So yeah, even the fact of you were a convert to this data when you started looking into it. So let's go ahead and get into your presentation now and let you start doing that.
Yeah, it is not easy, Chris. This information is it turned my worldview upside down.
Yeah.
And I just want people to realize that this is going to take some courage, not an understanding the information. You don't have to be an architect or engineer to get this information. A seventh grader can pick this stuff up real easily. But what it does to our belief system, because if this is true, that these buildings were blown up, and I will prove to you today that this is the fact, then what does that mean? Our own government murdered 3,000 people, people within our government and industry. The media lied to us. I thought they were supposed to dig in and tell us the truth, right? It means a lot of things, and it's really disturbing was for me and for a lot of people. So that's why I want people to dare to know the truth.
Absolutely.
And to dig with us today. We'll start with Building 7. It was a 47-story skyscraper. Now, most people, including most architects and engineers, know nothing about the third worst structural failure in modern history. This building was about 110 yards away from the North Tower. It would be the tallest building in most of our states. In fact, it's huge. It just dwarfed next to the tallest buildings in the world at the time they were built, World Trade Center towers. It's part of the World Trade Center complex, just north of the North Tower. And this building was not hit by an airplane. So it's kind of a perfect case study. So, because people say, "Oh, the planes hit the towers, all that jet fuel." We'll get to that. But this building was not hit by a plane, and yet it went down anyway. It is seen standing here just fine after the North Tower was hit. Here, let's look at the building coming down. This happens at 5:20 in the afternoon, about 7 hours after the towers came down. The east penthouse drops first in the upper left, and then in an isolated event. And then 6 seconds later, this happens straight down, uniformly, symmetrically, into its own footprint, and under 6 seconds. And this has been studied by NIST for 7 or 8 years, and here's their explanation.
What we found was that uncontrolled building fires caused an extraordinary event. The collapse of World Trade Center 7 was primarily due to fire.
So, fires. Well, let's look at those fires. We have the worst fires that we have photos or videos of are, in fact, these. And they are few. They are small, relatively small, and scattered throughout the building. And so they're going to bring this building down in the manner that you saw? We don't think so. And so we have...
Ours, and you can see...
Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens to this building according to the official narrative.
And you can see on the screen, the column at the very right is column 79. And that's the column that first buckles, causing the floors to come down, followed by a quick succession of failures of adjoining columns.
Well, interesting. So they have a computer model that they use to prove that this building came down by fire, which completely ignores the incredible strength of these columns, not one of which gave any resistance to this building, as you'll see. Massive structure. These elements, and we've never lost a steel frame fire protected structure ever in the history of steel frame fire protected structures. even though we've had much larger, longer lasting, and hotter fires in these buildings, including after 9/11, where we have fully engulfed fires. There's been about 6 more of these fully engulfed skyscrapers. They have never failed. So you see, NIST has some real explaining to do. But what we're going to do is take a look at the features of controlled demolition, beginning with, is there a sudden onset of the destruction of this building? Feature number 1 of typical controlled demolition. Let's compare. Listen to Dan Rather tell his narrative of what he's looking at that evening. Uh-oh.
And what you're seeing are high shots. Now, here we're going to show you a videotape of the collapse itself.
Describe that.
Now we go to videotape, the collapse of this building.
It's amazing.
Amazing, incredible, pick your word. For the 3rd time today, it's reminiscent of those pictures we've all seen too much on television before, when a building was deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down.
Oh, what was that, Dan? Deliberately destroyed by well-placed dynamite to knock it down. He's using his intuition here, right? We all should. We have a frame of reference. We've seen the old hotels in Las Vegas and how they come down. But Dan has never repeated these words after 9/11. In fact, we've never seen this building coming down on national television. It should have been the most studied structural failure ever by architects and engineers. And again, most know nothing about it. So we have an incredible dichotomy. And so we have to do some more digging. Feature number 2, is there a straight down symmetrical collapse? Let's look from West Street. Yeah, pretty straight down, pretty symmetrical. How do we do that? That's not easy to do. So, and into its own footprint. Yeah, the center of the pile is in the center of the building's footprint. So, how does that even happen? This was a 47-story moment-resisting steel frame building, and it falls like a house of cards, where every column and beam gave up their connections to each other in order to fall in order for a 47-story skyscraper to collapse like a house of cards. So what has to happen? We have to have a patterned removal of column supports. These are them, 80 of them. They all have to be removed, starting with the interior columns, 24 of them, and progressing to the exterior columns about a second later. Within a fraction of a second, the interior columns have to be taken out, and then the exterior columns. Are these fires going to be able to accomplish that? No. Well, what can? Well, controlled demolition can and has. This has been the means by which they do this. Take a look on the right. A series of known controlled demolitions. Building 7 on the left. Is there any similarity? Yeah. Is there enough similarity to warrant an investigation into the possible use of explosives, especially since fire, the official cause of this building's collapse, has never in history brought down a steel frame fire-protected structure? Probably should have been the first hypothesis that NIST considered. But no, it was relegated to a set of very frequently asked questions published on their website years later. So these fires are going to bring it down symmetrically? We don't think so. What can? Well, explosives could. Do we have any witnesses of explosions? Here's NIST's Sham Sunder.
We did not find any evidence that explosives were used in the collapse of Building 7. We ran down detailed computer simulations of blast scenarios. This size blast would have produced an incredibly loud sound that was not recorded on videos of the collapse nor reported by witnesses.
No? Well, let's just look at a few of them. Here's Daryl, a medical student, being interviewed that evening on New York radio.
We were watching the building actually because it was on fire. The bottom floors of the building were on fire, and we heard this sound that sounded like a clap of thunder. Turned around, we were shocked to see that the building was, it looked like there was a shock wave ripping through the building, and the windows all busted out, and it was horrifying. Then, about a second later, the bottom floor caves out, and the building followed after that, and we saw the building crash down all the way to the ground.
Okay, a sound of a clap of thunder, a shockwave ripping through the building, the windows busting out, and then the building coming down. Not the building coming down, creating that phenomena. Let's listen to Kevin McPadden, former Air Force medic, who was on hand.
And then it was like another 2-3 seconds. You heard explosions, like boom. It's like a distinct sound. It's not like when in compression, like boom, 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 like floors that were dropping and collapsing. This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something. That, to me, I knew that was an explosion. There was no doubt in my mind.
Well, that's helpful witness that NIST did not cover either. And what did this gentleman see?
I'm going to call in Bill Rosati. He was here when it all happened. He saw it for himself. Bill, if you can just tell us what you saw, what you heard.
I was standing like 2 blocks away, and all of a sudden I just seen a big flash, and then I seen the building coming down, and I just seen people just running everywhere.
A big flash. That's helpful. Well, how about Barry Jennings, who was at the New York Office of Emergency Management, called to a meeting that day along with Mayor Giuliani's attorney, Michael Hess. They arrived late for the meeting, didn't realize the whole building had been evacuated after the first plane hit the tower, the North Tower. And this is their experience trying to get out of the building from the 23rd floor because they were told to leave the building.
When we got to the 8th floor, I started walking to one side of the building. That side of the building was gone. The first explosion I heard when I was on the stairwell landing, when we made it down to the 6th floor. Then we made it back to the 8th floor. I heard some more explosions.
What's the sound?
Like a boom, like an explosion.
More than one?
Yes. We started walking down the stairs. We made it to the 8th floor. Big explosion. Blew us back into the 8th floor. When we get outside, a police officer comes to me and says, "You have to run. We have more information of bombs, so you have to run."
Information of bombs? Bombs like this heard in the late morning of 9/11 in the vicinity of Building 7?
Yeah, here's one of the guys who can tell you I'm okay, all right? Here, hold on. You want to call your mother or something?
And this says there's no witnesses of explosions. Well, there's a video witness of an explosion. But all this is just ignored. Well, we're going to be looking at the evidence of extreme heat here now. And this is a World Trade Center 7 beam that this structural engineer who had access to the landfill and to study these beams under the National Science Foundation grant, Abel Hassan Astani Azl, says, I saw a melting of girders at the World Trade Center. Doesn't know how this could happen. There was a report by FEMA, who Dr. Jonathan Barnett, the author of that report, says steel members in the debris pile appear to have been partly evaporated in extraordinarily high temperatures. But it takes 4,000 degrees to evaporate steel. So what are we talking about here? How do we get 4,000 degrees? We have Mark Loiseau exclaiming, molten steel was found at World Trade Center 7 steel. Office fires and jet fuel cannot melt steel. We're only talking about 500 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It takes 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit to melt steel, 4,000 to evaporate it. And yet that's what FEMA found in Appendix C in the May 2002 Building Performance Assessment Team report, in their metallurgical examination, which they included in Appendix C, they cite never before observed eutectic reactions causing intergranular melting, capable of turning a solid steel girder into Swiss cheese, like this piece of the end of the beam at World Trade Center 7. They have no idea how this happened. Yet they document rapid oxidation, sulfidation, liquid iron. That's molten iron. That's more than 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit iron. Sulfur formed during this hot corrosion attack on the steel. Where did this sulfur come from? It's perhaps the deepest mystery uncovered in the investigation. Yet it was completely ignored by NIST. Incredible. So where do they say, well, we couldn't test the steel. There's no steel from World Trade Center 7. But again and again, it's cited in the NIST report that the steel wasn't tested, but we just saw a metallurgical test of the steel. And here it says no metallurgy could be carried out because no steel was recovered from 7. And that was a piece of World Trade Center 7 beam that NIST's John Gross is standing on the pile highlighting that he gave to Worcester Polytechnic University to perform that metallurgical examination. They're lying all over the place. Their shadow is all over the evidence. But they get by with it because people believe them, because they're authorities. We have extreme temperatures here, but hydrocarbons can only burn 600 to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. We're talking temperatures 3 and 4 times that. We can tell by the color of molten metal pouring out of the crab claw excavators what its temperature is by its color. We're exceeding 2,500 degrees just right here. And then the fact that it's molten means over 3,000 degrees. So what caused the steel to melt? Well, let's look at the evidence for thermite incendiaries. Do we have any? Yeah. From where? Well, turns out that the U.S. Geological Survey did a study on the dust, publishing it in 2005. They found that in their particle atlas of the World Trade Center dust, there are billions of what? Previously molten, meaning 3,000 degrees plus, iron, meaning where does molten iron come from? It's not steel. It's molten iron. Well, molten iron is the byproduct of thermite, an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. Well, look at that. Up to 6% of many of these samples are iron spheres, previously molten iron microspheres. In fact, there's estimated to be up to 4 tons of them by extrapolation in all the World Trade Center dust. Where do they come from? Well, we could do an experiment. Experiment is the arbiter of competing hypotheses. It's a truth teller. Let's do one. Let's burn some thermite in a controlled experiment. Just in this small experiment, we see what look like thousands of sparks, but they cool, they fall into the pan. They are previously molten iron microspheres. Why are they spherical? Well, when you aerosolize liquids under high pressure, like explosions, you get spheres, like when water is aerosolized. In the case of iron, it cools and falls with all of the dust. Well, you can use thermite in a controlled experiment with shaped cutter charges to cut through steel, like John Cole, civil engineer, did in this experiment. So they're not as loud as explosions, but they can certainly cut through steel. What else was found in the World Trade Center dust? Any evidence of unignited thermite found in the World Trade Center dust? That was all evidence of ignited thermite. Well, yeah, a team of 8 international scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen identifies and studies 7 independently collected samples that were sent to him, like from this apartment on Liberty Street across the street from the World Trade Center towers, Jeanette McKinley's apartment, one of these 4 samples. And they studied all of them. They have the curious red-gray chips. They look like paint chips. They thought they were paint at first. And indeed, they study the red layer and they find that they have iron and aluminum, the signature of thermite. What's the signature of thermite doing in all of these red-gray paint chips? They get real curious now. They zoom in 50,000 times to this red layer, and they find nano-sized particles of iron oxide crystals and aluminum platelets, 1,000 times smaller than the diameter of a human hair. Very high-tech stuff. Where do they're set in an a bed of organic material, oxygen, silica, carbon. Well, fascinating. Organic materials put in high-energy explosives like TNT to expand rapidly and knock things over. That's how explosives work. Whereas incendiaries work by means of heat. They burn things up, which is why they don't have the heavy explosion, sounds of explosions that TNT, RDX do, which are more typically RDX used for taking down buildings in controlled demolitions. So this is unusual. So they ignite in a differential scanning calorimeter these paint chips. And what do you think they produce when they ignite? Molten iron microspheres with the same chemical signature as the molten iron microspheres found and analyzed and documented by the U.S. Geological Survey and R.J. Lee from the World Trade Center dust. So we know exactly where those previously molten iron microspheres came from. They came from these red-gray chips, as if we didn't know. They're found attached to partially ignited red-gray chips, as you see here and here. This is a very sophisticated process. When you, in nanotechnology, when you get the particles so small, the chemical reaction is almost instantaneous. So you've engineered something that's an incendiary to become more explosive. It's not made in a cave in Afghanistan. It's made only in the most advanced defense contracting laboratories. So we know where to go. The people who make nanothermite could probably answer a lot of questions, but of course no one's investigating them. But Niels Harrit and his team with Stephen Jones did investigate this material, and they did conclude in this 25-page peer-reviewed paper in the Bentham Open Chemical Physics Journal. What'd they find? The red layer is active, unreacted thermitic material incorporating nanotechnology. It's a highly energetic, pyrotechnic, or explosive material. My God, this peer-reviewed paper has been given to every congressman by me personally, not every one of them, but our team gave them on 2 separate occasions this peer-reviewed paper and explained the startling, compelling scientific forensic evidence to them and asked them to deal with it. But they didn't deal with it. And so we have an open-ended problem here that's been used to justify the subsequent invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq. And, of course, they had to destroy the evidence. Were you going to say something, Chris?
Oh, no. I was just going to say, this is exactly what we're dealing with. There's destruction of evidence, things like that, the steel being shipped off for smelting, all kinds of things.
Oh, yeah, this is the largest and most perplexing structural failure in history. They had 400 truckloads a day lined up to take this steel away, starting in the week and 2 after 9/11, before investigators could get their hands on it and do a proper investigation. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene. One of the things that prompted the University of Alaska to get involved and study this material, because there's this destructive process, because there are hundreds of similarly designed buildings, steel frame, fire protected structures, skyscrapers that could fall at free fall with a few small scattered fires. It's a real problem. So they independently, with Professor Leroy Hulsey, one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, and his team of independent scientists, they found that fire didn't cause the collapse of this building. This was a 4-year study. Temperatures were not high enough to cause a weakening of the steel framing. Thermal expansion did not result in a loss of support for the beams and girders. Building 7 did not experience a progressive collapse, as claimed by NIST. It was a global collapse caused by what? The near simultaneous failure of all of its columns. Wow. Their model is on the left. The video of the building's collapse is in the middle, and this computer model, which we saw earlier, is on the right. They stop their model because it begins to tip over. It begins to crumple like a beer can. They've tried to back engineer it, releasing 400 structural steel connections every second. They still can't get it to fall at free fall, and they stop it because they don't want us to see what happens to it after that. The Hulsey report said, what do we have to do? They have to take out all the core columns, floor by floor, within a fraction of a second of each other, followed about a second later by the perimeter columns, and that's what you get. And so that's what happened to Building 7. So this is one of the many reasons we have more than 3,500 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation. And we have put them to film in the boardroom with the grand jury testifying to the expertise of 24 of them, structural engineers, fire protection engineers, and controlled demolition experts, and high-rise architects, many others, joining us, demanding a new investigation. And so we have webinars that people can look at more and get more information on the website, richardgage911.org. We have lots of answers to some difficult questions that a lot of people don't want to raise, such as why Larry Silverstein, for instance, is telling us on a year later about Building 7.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
That's pretty darn interesting because the firefighters were never in the building. They were told not to fight the fire in the building. And we know that FEMA and NIST said the firefighters, there was no firefighting operations in the building. So there was no firefighters to pull, because Larry Silverstein came back and said, oh, I meant not pull the building. I meant pull the firefighters out of the building. But they again, they weren't there. So we have the question of whether planes impacted these buildings or not. And sure enough, they did. We see the evidence of that in these close-ups of the steel bent inward with the plane. The steel isn't, most of it is actually not cut. It is broken, where the plane took these orthogonal sections and pushed them inward, shearing the 4 bolts that connected the columns one to another every 37 feet. So that's darn interesting as well. We have the question of directed energy weapons. Did they bring this tower down? Well, we're told that this steel is turning to dust, but the hundreds of studies of samples in the dust by many different agencies show there's no steel dust in the dust. The steel is these few remaining core columns that stand 900 feet in the air for a dozen seconds drop through the smoke of the explosions that had been set on them and the concrete powder. So we can see the top part falling frame by frame through the smoke. There's no dustified steel. We have iron microspheres in the steel. That's an evidence of extreme heat, unaccountable for in the official narrative and by directed energy weapons, which the purporters of suggest was a cold event, not a hot event. So we have the debris not disappearing, but filling the entire complex and well beyond 20 times the area of the footprint of the towers, in fact. That's where the steel is, and it's ejected laterally with 4-ton structural steel sections ejected laterally, landing up to 600 feet in every direction, ejected at 80 miles an hour, clocked by physicists, destroying the winter gardens 600 feet away. So this is evidence of explosive energy in this case. And then we have the evidence of extreme heat as well. And so directed energy weapons does not create this phenomena, according to those who are purporting that it was indeed what brought down the towers.
Yeah.
But that doesn't create molten iron microspheres and 2,800 degree temperatures documented by so many, including the Bechtel group in this case. So we also have the question of how could they have gotten access to the towers to plant high energy explosives and incendiaries like thermite and nanothermite, as we saw the evidence for. Well, one possibility is the elevator modernization, which Ace Elevator received the contract, having gotten it away from Otis Elevator, who had installed and had been maintaining these elevators up to the time of the collapse. But the 9 months prior to 9/11, there was a elevator modernization, the largest one in the world, actually. Ace Elevator. Their only client was the Port Authority, the Twin Towers, for this project. It's well documented. if you had access to the core, the elevator shafts, you'd have access to the core columns and beams in the area, which is what you would need access to plant explosives. So we certainly want an investigation of ACE elevator, and we certainly have access to wireless detonation. It doesn't have to be miles and miles of detonation cord that are just strewn everywhere throughout a demolition site typically. So we have lots of evidence that we've been looking at in part 1 of the 3-part webinar, which we largely looked at today. We have building 7. In part 2, the Twin Towers, which we can go into if you have and want more time, Chris, or we can come back and do this another time. But what we're going to see when we do either way is we're told that the top part of the structure drove the rest of the building down to the ground and then destroyed itself. And that's not what we see, though. What we see in the videos we're going to show is the top part destroying itself in the first 3 seconds. It's not there. We're going to see 4-ton structural steel sections ejected laterally, trailing thick white smoke clouds. Wait a minute. Steel is not flammable in office fire or jet fuel conditions. Why are they trailing thick white smoke clouds? Well, that's the aluminum oxide ash, the byproduct of thermite, in addition to molten iron. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was gonna say I definitely want to have you back on to talk about this specifically, with the Twin Towers. Let's start digging into a few questions about Building 7 specifically.
Indeed.
The first one that I have, which I bring up all the time, Richard, is with anybody who is an architect, an engineer. I asked it of every single guest that I interviewed at the 9/11 conference who was an architect or engineer, the fact of, did the collapse of this building due to fire, as said in the NIST report, did the collapse of this steel frame building due to fire cause the change of any kind of building code required for steel frame buildings, required for buildings of that type? Because I'm sure there's just a few dozen that's been built worldwide since,
Oh yeah, a lot of them. And there's been no structural changes to the building code. NIST had several suggestions for structural changes and for evacuating the buildings, and systems for fireproofing adhesion, because they made all these recommendations, but there are no recommendations that have been adopted by the International Building Code that would keep a steel frame from coming apart and falling at free fall in a few small office fires. They did not adopt changes to their structural codes. And so, well, wait a minute. This was the whole problem, because NIST has a whole theory of thermal expansion, that long span beams expanded due to the incredible fires that were beneath them, and they pushed this girder off of its seat on this particular column 79 and caused floor 13 to fall on 12 and 12 on 11 and so on for 9 floors. That's the whole theory that started the pancaking collapse, progressive collapse as they call it.
Yeah.
And that is a set of structural problems which NIST was highlighting. Well, there was no fire at the time. The fires were out over an hour before the towers collapsed. So they exaggerated and made claim that those fires were expanding those beams at the time of the collapse. And we've proven them wrong again and again on that point too. So no code changes.
Yeah.
No structural code changes.
And once again, the idea of the National Institute for Science and Technology basically saying that
standards and technology.
Sorry, saying that they didn't test for explosives because they didn't expect to find any explosives.
Yes.
That one to me is a wild one and very interesting. Despite what you may think, folks, when it comes to nanothermite, like Richard is talking about, whenever we had Richard on for the first time, I actually dug this up. As you guys know, we have quite a few things in our knowledge vault, but right over here in our knowledge vault, folks, if you go to Scientific Studies and Docs, right down here, nano aluminum thermite formulations. So yeah, here are actual studies and things like that characterizing the properties of nanothermite and its uses, stuff like that. And it's literally like describing exactly what Richard is talking about, like the precise use that he is talking about. So it's one of those, when you start looking at all these things, it does add up to some nefarious stuff, Richard, and some very nefarious possibilities, because it's fascinating to me. The sphericals, the testing for nanothermite, the finding of nanothermite, everything else. And there's your presentation with the actual pictures of the flakes. These are things that I would say, once again, as y'all are calling for, I think it requires another investigation. I think it requires independent investigation, at the very least.
Yeah, it really does. And that's why we've taken it to Congress and gotten literally, well, hardly any results. Jim Hines of Connecticut did write a letter to NIST saying, hey, what is this nanothermite that they're talking about? NIST writes back and says, oh, don't worry about that. There's aluminum cladding on the building and rust on the, which is actually the two main ingredients of thermite.
Yes.
Iron oxide and aluminum powder. And they must have somehow magically combined with each other in the perfect ratio and formed nanothermite on the way down from the collapse.
Well, here in the last few minutes, Richard, let's sum this up on Building 7, things like that. What can people look for as those signature points of a free fall? The one that I've always looked at and seen is that point where you see the penthouse fall first. And that wouldn't be a typical thing. But it would be a typical thing if you were bringing a building down. The idea of there it is. Oh, sorry. There you go. Where you can actually see in that top left where the penthouse is, where that weight falls first. Because if you took the building out before that falling, everything would tilt to that side because of weight.
Yes, well, NIST has stated that the damage and the initiation of collapse occurred in the northeast corner of the building. Well, if that were expected, you'd expect if that were true, you'd expect the building to fall to the left, right?
Yeah.
Because that's if your knee is taken out, you fall over that way. You would expect this in any kind of a natural collapse, gravitational collapse by damage.
Yeah.
And damage by fire in that case, damage by beams hitting Building 7 from the World Trade Center North Tower when it went down, because there was some damage on the opposite corner, the southwest corner, but it didn't fall that way either. So no, it falls in the exact manner expected by a controlled demolition. with explosives.
Especially whenever you watch this right-hand side of the screen coming up here, folks, as the, like, bam, where, like, you see almost everything on that side, all the windows explode at the same time, just going up the building. It's like in a zipper style. And it's fascinating. And when you look at this once again, at the fact of it is at free fall speed. It's not at a collapse or, tilt to the side or failure of the structure in some kind of way speed. Yeah. So where do we take things from here, Richard? What can we do? What can people do to get involved? What can people do to take because I was very happy to see that, yes, there were senators that attended the 9/11 conference this last year in DC and came and spoke. Things like that. So it's fantastic to see once again that this many years down the road, there are people looking at this with new eyes.
Mm-hmm. We succeeded in getting Senator Ron Johnson to join us in because he had been asking lots of questions about 9/11.
Yeah,
having Tucker Carlson and Redacted, and he joined Tucker in asking these serious questions. And I spent 90 minutes with the senator on the phone a few months ago, presenting a lot more detail than we were able to look at here. And he was fascinated. And he said, yeah. And he came to the conference in DC and spoke as our keynote speaker, saying, yeah, I have a platform. And if you put irrefutable evidence together, and we've got all these videos that he cited that are all over the place, but nothing that combines our total work in the most irrefutable evidence that we have. And it'll include, of course, everything we've looked at today. But this is going to be a couple of thousand pages with appendices and everything. There's a lot of evidence. So he's, in effect, told us that there would be there could be a set of Senate hearings, because he is the chair of the Senate Subcommittee on Investigations, as it turns out. And that's how he was able to get the COVID hearings, and which were extraordinary. It produced a lot of powerful stuff.
Yeah. No, like I remember when the COVID hearing happened, the source of the coronavirus hearing, and there were like all of 3 news organizations off in the side booth with the live stream going on. And I downloaded the whole thing in case it got disappeared. But man, that was a revelatory panel, and things like that happen. And it's fantastic. And it's great to see that stuff. And once again, I think that we are at a very cusp moment right now, in not only in history, but in the history of our country, and in the history of truth for a lot of things, Richard. There is a huge push for disclosure on so many fronts, capital D disclosure. And I think this is one of them for a lot of people, where regardless of where they stand politically, there has always been some kind of lingering something in the back of their mind about it.
And there should be, because there are so many questions, and we're going to lose our country, if we haven't already, into a deep tyranny. And we've got to wake everybody up. That's why I'm asking every one of your viewers to take this podcast and show it to every friend you have, everybody you care about, and every architect and engineer you can find, your elected representatives and media representatives. We have got to scream this from the rooftops. 9/11 is easy to get. With COVID, they'll accuse you, well, you're not a doctor. What do you know? And though you can cite the work of dozens and dozens and dozens of doctors and health professionals who were blowing the whistle. 9/11 can be got at an intuitive level because, like you said, Building 7 could not have come down symmetrically due to the damage that from the fires. And so it's just intuitive. It couldn't come down at free fall. Free fall is as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky. And yet, how does that happen? That means not one of the 82 columns in that building gave any resistance to that falling building.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense at all to anybody. So, yeah, a 7th grader can get this. So tell every 7th grader also, because they're going to be talking about it. They're saying, wait a minute, the world is not what I thought it was. We're not safe under the government that we thought we elected to represent us. What's really going on here? We've been manipulated into supporting wars in which 2 million people have been killed in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah.
We have lost our civil liberties through the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, in which any of us can be arrested without a right to a lawyer, a trial, a jury.
That's right. And Richard, added to that was the 100-mile rule that came around in 2012, where within 100 miles of any border, land, sea, or air to the United States, your Fourth Amendment right is null and void.
Yeah.
That's how they were able to just like snatch protesters off the street in Portland. Was like, yeah, look, there's the ocean. Hey, Customs House, these things all cumulatively, and that's what people don't understand. It really is a horrifying spider web of small little points, and because it's not one massive thing. This was one massive thing that happened, but it definitely, I think, arm twisted a lot of people into giving up liberties that they did not realize they were giving up, and giving them up under the guise of protection and safety, to the point that even now most of the hard rules that came about with TSA and things like that are just about null and void. They've changed quite a few of them since that point, because they've realized it's not metrically making a difference in any kind of way. How can people find your work, Richard? How can they find the videos that you have? How can they find these modules that you have on the website, things like that? How can people get involved and contact their senator? How can people get architects that they're friends with, physicists that they're friends with, involved in looking at this? Where can they find data? Where can they find everything from you?
Well, start right here, richardgage911.org. There's videos, there's interviews like this one, and so much more. There's a white paper people like to read. You can download the PDF. There's just a lot of ways to share this information. Just send the links to everybody. If you don't know what else to do, just send this link and let them find the website, find our documentary 9/11 Crime Scene to Courtroom, in which we have those 24 experts, and you can watch the 5 episodes that we've already put together. We've got 7 more to do on the extreme heat and the Twin Towers. And boy, there's just, I highly recommend that one. That's our latest and greatest documentary film series, taking the hard evidence of crimes, 9/11 crimes to court. So yeah, don't be shy. Get on the website and hack your way around and have your mind blown if you're new to this information.
Once again, folks, up until probably, many of you know, it's one of my dirty secrets that I used to be an on-air producer for Alex Jones. And even whenever I worked with him, I was like, I don't know about a lot of this. But over the years, I have seen some of your presentations. People had presented some of your stuff to me. People had presented some of the videos from other people who I met at the 9/11 conference this last year to me. And watching those with true open heart, true open mind, and just going, I want to see the science behind this. Reading things from the NIST report, stuff like that, and going, what is this gaping hole? That they literally tried to just like staple and bandage over and then turn the page. There are just horrifying gaping holes in that report, and it's sad to know that so many people suffered, so many people are still suffering, even from illness, things like that, first responders, all kinds of things. So thank you for the work that you have done. Thank you, Gail, if you were out there listening tonight, for the work that you have done with Richard. Let everybody know one more time before we let you go, where they can go to find your work, where they can go to contact you, where they can go to get involved, Richard.
Richard Gage, 911.org. We'll see you
Fantastic.
there.
Absolutely. Richard, thank you as always for coming on. We need to have you on again here in the next few months, actually, just to go over all of the data from the Twin Towers, because once you start getting into that, it gets even deeper. This I think is a great opening salvo for a lot of people, where it's not the mind crusher that the other one is. Once you get into the Twin Towers, it gets a whole lot deeper, folks. So Richard, thank you again for your time as always. Thank you for all that you do for the movement. Take care, and we'll chat with you soon. We'll be sending links and everything else.
Right on. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks,
care, everybody.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for coming on. Man, always incredible, everybody. I love the work of Richard Gage. He is so well put together on this data, and really has just a very factual approach on it. And it's one of those that, once again, it takes being willing to look at something with a different set of eyes. It takes being willing to remove yourself from a situation, and see things with unscaled eyes. So once again, folks, stop on by richardgage911.org. That is where you can find all of the work of Richard Gage. That is where you can find all the documentaries. That's where you can find the technical articles that he's talking about. That is where you can find the white paper, all kinds of things. If you head over to the scientific studies and documents area, that's where you can find the nano aluminum thermite formulations papers I was telling you about. You can also find the NIST documents, things like that. And of course, if you head over to our events page, that is where you can find all of our live coverage from amazing events like the Turning the Tide 9/11 Truth Conference this last year in D.C., where we interviewed Richard and so many others. When we come back from this quick commercial break, everybody, we will be joined by our good friend and founder of Cygames International, Hakim Isler. We will be talking about the world of psychokinesis, the skill of psychokinesis. And believe me, folks, until the day I bent my first spoon, I was not a believer. But I did it, and it's fascinating. And we'll be talking about Hakim's upcoming actual psychokinesis workshop here in Austin, March 12th through the 16th. So we'll be getting into that. We'll be getting into some of what's going on there. We will be getting into the history and skills of psychokinesis with Hakim Isler right after this.
The key to good science is good research. At the heart of good research is a good data set. With the field observation and encounter log from Curious Research, you can easily keep track of your investigative information all in one place, making it easier to review cases and readily see comparisons and contrasts between them. Whether out in the woods squatching, in a back room gathering EVPs, or using high-tech gear to track UFO, UAP activity, this easy-to-carry, pocket-sized scientific data log is the perfect companion for any field researcher. You can find your copy of the Curious Research Field Observation and Encounter Log at Amazon.com or visit the official Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to reserve your copy for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back from that quick commercial break. Thank you so much for staying with us, and also thank you so much to our sponsors, especially True Hemp Science. If you are a user of CBD products like I am, stop on by True Hemp Science today. Christopher Lynch and True Hemp Science use a spagyric process where they use every part of the hemp plant, everything from the seeds, the stems, the roots, the leaves, the buds. Every part is used, reused, combusted, and reused to make an amazing spagyric product, complete with terpene profiles, all the goodies, everything else. Stop on by, check them out. TrueHempScience.com is the website that you want to go to. Curious7 is the code that you want to use to save 7% off your entire cart of $50 or more and get a free edible on your way out the door. Our guest in this segment is our good friend and founder of Psygames International, Hakim Isler. We will be talking with him about an amazing training program that he has coming up right here in Austin, Texas. This is happening March 16th. 12th through the 16th, rather, here in Austin. It is a psychokinesis training workshop, and I am so entirely excited about this because it's not common that you find all kinds of remote viewing workshops, Hakim. You find all kinds of mediumship workshops, even dowsing workshops I see pretty regularly at many places. However, you do not find like a psychokinesis workshop. And that was one of, I think, the most compelling parts of Psygames this last year, was seeing the live demonstrations of psychokinesis, seeing people move the psychokinesis wheel, things like that. How did you guys, and I don't want you to give away too much, but how did you guys develop that? How did y'all develop the whole protocol for testing psychokinesis?
Yeah, so a lot of this, well, first, let me thank you for having me on the show again. That's always important to lead with that. And now going into that, you know, the idea really was, it came as a part of a natural progression. So, you know, I played sports when I was a kid. You played sports when you were a kid. You know, you would have like basketball, your basketball team, and then you would also have basketball training camps, and they would prepare you during the off season to be even better for the camp. I mean, for the team, you know? And so the idea of having a training program that was run by the Psygames organization was very important to me, not because there weren't other people out there doing different things. We want to support them too. Our whole goal is to get more people to do this and to get involved. But we also felt that we have a very specific angle we wanted to come from, which holds with our ethos, which is in informing people of the past research that was done, and the pioneers, we call them, that were working on these type of, you know, protocols and things, and then teach people a grounded understanding of how to do psychokinesis or any of the psi abilities, but in this case, psychokinesis. What is psychokinesis? How does it differ in its different forms? And then what is telekinesis? And then how do you actually do those things? And how do you maintain your energy revitalize your energy, move your energy. All that stuff is part of the course, and it's part of what we're trying to get across in this one program. So it's a very deep dive, which is why we call it an intensive, an immersive training program, because we want people to walk away from this and have a really deep knowledge of what's happening and how to do it, and then how to develop it, which is very important.
Well, and it's interesting because you I think have a very specific background that ties into so many of these things. For those of our audience that is not aware, Hakim is actually an actual ninja. He has studied ninjutsu under Stephen Hayes, all sorts of things. And the actual traditions of ninjutsu, things like that, when you're talking specifically, and let me know if I'm saying this wrong, but retsu, the idea of controlling space and time, being able to control space, or whether it's getting into that zone where, much like anybody hitting a 90-mile-per-hour speedball coming at you, that things slow down and you're able to see the moment before the moment happens, or whether you are, like you're saying, projecting your energy to a point that you're changing the gap of space and time between you and an object in that kind of way. So these are not, for a lot of, the only way I can say it, Hakim, is for the normal people out there, because not a lot of people understand the fact that these are traditions and things that have been taught throughout different disciplines across the globe, throughout time, all kinds of things. So it's only us here in the West who really view these things in kind of a verboten way.
Yeah. And so you have like Qigong in China, and it's all types of different traditions that talk about this interaction with matter, and how do we as individual people, and even as a collective, communicate with other forms of matter, whether it be biological matter, whether it be organic matter, whether it be, inanimate matter. How do we communicate and influence that matter? And so this is something that has been going on in many world traditions for a long, long period of time. Here in the West, on some levels, we have been aware of it, but for the mainstream, it's something that we tend to fall behind or lag behind on. And so, or because of, some of the cultural aspects of where we live in the West, and how, and what was dominant in the West at one point in time, people believe, based on, their different belief systems, that, these things aren't stuff that are for ordinary people. And that has hindered some of the growth as well. So I find it very interesting, that dynamic. But going back to what you were talking about in my training, yes, this has been a part of my life for a long period of time before I actually started, learning from people who were researchers in the field of parapsychology, and, really understanding the data and the research that has been done in those different places, like, the Ryan Institute, J.B. Ryan's research and his, and what he did, and what Russia did in the past when they were doing studies on psychokinesis, and, what we as the American government has done with studies on psychokinesis. So it's a very broad, data set of things that we can look at, where we can really understand what's going on with this. And then it can be a jumping off point for us to really develop this to the next stage.
Well, for those that may not be schooled, let's begin at the beginning here. What is the definition of psychokinesis? You mentioned that a while ago, the idea of defining that and separating that from specifically telekinesis, things like that. So let's start with psychokinesis and what that's about, and what, at least right now, what research is considering regarding psychokinesis, Hakim.
Yeah, so this is a really great question. So because we're on martial arts, a really great way to put it is psychokinesis is like martial arts, right? It's an umbrella term. And then there are all these different styles of martial arts, right? So there's Kung Fu and Ninjutsu and Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. And then those different styles focus on different things. Like there's electrokinesis and, there's aerokinesis and hydrokinesis and, telekinesis. So all these different aspects of being able to influence matter, or, have mind matter interactions. And so psychokinesis is the broad term for really engaging through your mind or your consciousness matter out there in the world, or different objects. Like I said, it could be biological, it could be energetic, it could be organic, it could be inanimate or inorganic. So your ability to influence and have some sort of interaction with those things is really the umbrella term of psychokinesis, and doing that through the mind, and then there's telekinesis, which is a subset, which is your actual influence over objects, at a distance. So I can move a pen, or I can move a needle, or I can move a cup or something like that. So you're influencing that matter at a distance. And that's kind of like been the subset that they would call telekinesis. But it could also be influencing matter in like bending a spoon. Some people will consider that telekinesis, even though, you're not necessarily like at a distance, right? Or remotely, you're like there. So there's these different ideas that are floating around. And so we just want to jump into those aspects and really kind of give people a good understanding of what science has said about it. As people have been researching this, so it allows people to communicate better, right? And so we see this, you and I see this in remote viewing. Everything's become remote viewing. So now you talk to some people and they say, "Oh, I'm doing blindfolded seeing remote," but they're calling it remote viewing, right?
Yep.
And so then you're like, "Wait a minute, okay," and then or they'll say, "Oh yeah, I astro projected." But then they're calling that remote viewing, right? Yeah. They're like, I floated out of my body and I went to this place and I was looking at all this stuff and it was an amazing remote viewing session. And you're like, wait a minute, but if we're having a conversation where we're trying to develop something and really trying to move the needle, if we don't start with the same understanding of what the definition of what it is that we're talking about, it makes it really hard for us to focus in the same direction. So now here I am saying, hey, we need to be doing this as a research project or this, or try to do this. Why does he think that? And when we really get down to the crux, it's because we have two different definitions of what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
And Hakim, this is literally one of the things that I say that I love the remote viewing community for. Mm-hmm. And also one of the things that I say is the crux of the issue when discussing or researching paranormal, UFO, UAP, all these things, is because all those things have been put into the literal Kleenex box. The idea, because we just want a brand name. We just want something to call it. Whatever it is, let's be comfortable with it. So we call it all paranormal, and then come the time to get science involved. Oddly, science likes to literally classify things and define them very, very specifically and individually, So once you get science involved, they're like, but it's just all Kleenex. What's your problem? You said it's all Kleenex.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I love about the remote viewing community is that everybody is on board with that idea of, oh, no, what are you calling this in Italy? Because we need to call it the same thing in Germany. We need to make sure that we're calling it the same thing in Mexico and the United States so that we have a universal like science, hey, we can say, we could say metric standard all day, go to a scientific convention, guaranteed they're in metric. But like my 8-year-old just did a science experiment for the science fair. And I was like, no, you will take this in metric. Like, we aren't going to do, like, measure the crystal in inches. We'll do a conversion to inches so people understand, but your initial measurement will be a metric.
Metrics.
Because that's science.
Yeah.
You know?
And, I think there's a balance, too, because I really love what you're saying. And I struggle with this because we're talking about a taxonomy, right?
Yep.
But the idea is that also, how can we, the side games is built on fun and exploration. So also, how can we not get so caught up in words and terminologies that we lose just the fun of it, you know, and the exploration of it. And so there's this kind of weird, hazy, fine balance. It's like, and as I've been developing and growing the side games, me and my team, the idea is that, you have people who are really, really stuck in one way of scientific thinking. And then you have another group that's really stuck in this kind of free, for all, like, terminology and stuff. Yeah. And I'm saying, like, why don't we just kind of find some middle ground where we can kind of explore in both ways? And I've been lucky to find panelists and judges and commentators and people who are really willing to explore that. And I think that's really beautiful because it has also, though, been a very hard road. Because it is that fine line, too little. And now we're talking about everything under the sun and we can't actually communicate because we're like at the Tower of Babel, and too far. And now it's only such a niche group that can actually communicate that they're missing out on the possibilities that exist. And I bring this same example up so many times about the story that I read about Elon Musk and how he started the SpaceX program and when he made the first rocket, and he first wanted to buy rockets from Russia, because we as the U.S. was still getting our rockets from Russia. Let's backtrack. Before that, he approached NASA. NASA, of course, laughed at him and was like, "Hey, get out of here. You're not a rocket scientist. You're just some kid that got a bunch of money and now you want some new toys to play with." So they just weren't feeling it. So he was like, "No, I'm going to do it." So he went and met this guy in Russia. They changed the price in which they quoted him. And he didn't like that. They went from like 4 or 8 million per rocket to like 13 million per rocket. Once he got there, and he was like, "No, you're not going to swindle me into that." So he gets on the plane and he opens up a spreadsheet and he starts the process of line by line figuring out what it takes to make a rocket. And one of the things that he recognized was that, the body of the rocket looks like a grain silo. And I wonder if I could hire a grain silo manufacturer to just make the bodies of my rocket. And that would save me a bazillion dollars, because these guys are just stamping these things out all the time and they're durable and they got to withstand all types of forces, and so he that's what he did, So if he was so rigid, like these scientists, who were the best of the best, but still using old technology because they had no desire or no reason to look anywhere else outside of the scope of what that small little microscope they've been looking through. Yeah. And then if he was so out there that he wasn't willing to really recognize what it would take to do that, then he would have missed the mark. But because he was this proper balance of these two worlds, he was able to come up with these ideas and concepts. And where he did not have knowledge, he was able to hire people with that knowledge and then put them into action, which is also a skill within itself. And so how do I overlay that on this? I say, again, you could be so caught up on terminology that you and your little friends or group never really get anywhere. Yep. You could be so free on terminology that you can't build the Tower of Babel because nobody can speak to each other because we're all speaking about different things.
There's no focus.
Yeah. But how do we get to a point where we know just enough that we can actually come together around an idea and communicate that well and effectively, and then be able to grow to a new stage? And that's really what we're trying to do.
Well, and that's what I think is hugely important, because right now we are at a cusp, not only as society, but scientifically as well, And I know my audience knows that I browbeat it into them, but just the whole idea of quantum entanglement to begin with, and the idea that like we can influence things. The whole question in physics of, does the electron know it's being observed? Because it seems to have different observational qualities when I observe it and when you observe it. And it's even different when it comes down to the expectation of what the observer has. They've come to find out. And that's even creepier. The fact that like, no, it kind of behaves the way I expect it to behave. And when you expect it to behave a different way, it behaves that way.
Yeah.
It's strange and it's weird. And to know that like we're a part of that in a quantum field way, that we are made of just as much empty space as the next atom, and that we have control over things like that. It's fascinating to think about, and I can understand how the average person may find that just entirely scary.
Yes, I agree with that. I think, it is, because it's outside of the scope of what we know and what we feel comfortable with. And that always tends to, it takes a certain type of person to not be uncomfortable with that type of thing. Uncomfort with lack of knowledge or with lack of understanding around a particular thing. And even the idea that even if I had an understanding, I still may not have the ability to control that thing is also scary, So yeah, I can understand what makes an earthquake happen, but it's still super scary for multiple reasons. One being that I'd never know when they're going to show up. If they do show up, I can't stop them and I can't do anything about it. That's scary, So it's like having the knowledge is one step, but even then it doesn't absolve you of the discomfort or the fear that some people feel when they have that. And there's obviously very unique people who will strap on a wingsuit and jump out of a plane and fly in between mountains. And that's a small niche group of people.
Yeah.
because they don't have the same level of fear as everybody else.
Yeah. And it was really interesting this last year, especially at Psy Games, to see the range of people that were there, to see the range of people who were not only competing, but just there to observe and to see it. And the people who came out and were like, wow, that was like things that they had never considered before were done on stage in front of them. And let's start getting into this psychokinesis training that you have coming up here in Austin. What are some of the things, especially for those that may not be familiar? Let's start there, that they may get familiarized with, and then let's move into those that are familiar with this world, new things that they will be learning at that event, Hakim.
Yeah. So without killing the vibe for those who are actually coming and put it out there, just to give people an understanding, we're going to start with a deep dive into the historical aspect of what we know and what scientists have been researching over the past 150 to 200 years in the realm of psychokinesis. Different countries have studied, Russia, the US, what they learned about it. The ancient texts from India have talked about this and people have done it. So we're going to just do a deep dive into what that is. So people just, like I said, have a good foundation of a starting point. I think it's very important, let's say you're doing construction, right? And I'm like, man, how do I make a square frame for me to pour my concrete, right? And I'm sitting over here and I'm like looking at rope and I got these ropes and I'm trying to level it out and I'm doing all this stuff. And, and then I'm like trying to like finagle the square and I'm like, man, I don't understand. But yet you went to school for contracting or you studied as an apprentice with a contractor and you come up and say, oh man, you don't need any of that. Look here, if you just do this, this, and this, then you can have it. And I'm like, whoa, you just did that in 10 minutes, and it took me a whole day to just get to the point where I'm at now. So when you don't build off of what has already been done because you don't know, it could be hindering your process or prolonging it because you're just stumbling through the dark. So the whole idea of mentorship and passing on of information and knowledge is, and deep dives into knowledge, is that it can sometimes shorten the learning curve. And so the trick is, how do we shorten the learning curve, but then also not let that knowledge that we learn keep us from exploring possibilities that we may be new inventors of, right? So just because it's always been done that way and people have passed it down generation to generation doesn't mean it's going to always be the best way.
Yeah.
But having a knowledge of how it was done in the past gives you some forward momentum, and then maybe you can spring off of that into a new direction. Anyway, I just want to say why I feel learning history and understanding where these things came from is very important. Then next, what we're going to do is we're going to move into, well, what does it mean to have psychokinetic abilities, and how do you actually start the process of doing it? What ways do you get out of your own way so that you can do it? My friend Kim said it best. She said, teaching people that they can be their biggest hindrance. And then once they get past the fear and the doubt and the disbelief of that it can be done, then to help them recognize that when you're interacting with an object, like in the movie The Matrix, when the boy's telling Neo like about how to bend a spoon. But in this case, she says, and I love this quote, she says, teaching people that there is no spoon, but at the same time, there is a spoon. And I was like, fantastic, Kim. Like, what a good way to say that, like it's not a thing, but it is also a thing. Right. And how the balance there and understanding that balance will help you influence and work with that item to allow it to move or to bend or to do these things. So we're going to be teaching that too. Then there's a certain level of energetic resonance that you have to have within yourself. And quite often people don't really understand what or how to teach or to do that. So quite often I talk to people who have been training in PK or TK, and they're like, yeah, I did it for a day and then I had a headache and I was exhausted and I didn't know, I couldn't do anything and I couldn't think the next day. And it took me 5 days to recover. And then I tried it again and I did really well. And then guess what? The next day I had a headache and I couldn't sleep. I was super tired and I couldn't do any work. So there's something wrong with it. Doesn't mean that you can't do it, but then also we want to make sure that we don't push ourselves to a point where it's affecting us to a level, like starting at the gym. There's a proper way to do it. Yeah, if you're 20 and you could go to the gym and just bust out, 10 sets of, of something and in 10 reps of that same thing. And now all of a sudden, you're like feeling good and pumped and you bounce back real quick. And then when you're 30 or 40 and you do that, you're out of commission for a week because you got delayed onset of muscle soreness and you can't get out of bed and you can't use the toilet. And so there's a way to do it. Oh, let's start small and slow. Yeah. Let's do these things. This is the type of protein that we need to drink to kind of let ourselves heal. This is how much water we need to lubricate everything and make sure that, a day after tomorrow, I'm ready to go again. Not waiting 10 or 20 days to recover because I pushed it too hard. And so there's a balance there, and there's protocols to help with that we'll be teaching and delivering and giving people a chance to experience, not just for the body, but then also for the mind. How do we get the mind to shift into that state consistently? How do we get the mind to allow us to work with our body and our spirit to kind of bring together all of the abilities that we have into this one unified focus? And so we'll be teaching that. And then once you use that energy, then how do you rebuild that energy? And so we'll be talking about that as well. And then we'll be doing all of this within different aspects or modalities under the same umbrella of psychokinesis and telekinesis. So we'll use like the Egley wheel, which we consider macro PK, you influencing an actual physical object. And then we'll have some games on our software that we have being developed, Games Online. It's actually, we already had the level 1 or version 1, and now version 2 will be out, or just, several games just for the time for us to practice at this event. They're not up now, so if a person was to go there, they wouldn't be able to see it. And then we are able to have people practice micro PK, which is something that they did at the Princeton Pear Lab a lot.
Okay.
And so people understand that they can influence machines, and, they can influence things on a quantum digital level. So we will have that aspect as well in our training. And then we'll also be working in nature. You mentioned ninjutsu. And so I have a strong history in that. I mean, I've been training in ninjutsu since 1999. So, I have quite a long time that I've been involved in that. And we're going to be teaching people interaction with nature and plants and things of that nature. We've heard stories about like how ayahuasca was created. Not that we're going to be out there making ayahuasca. No, I'm just bringing it up because when people ask the natives, this is a very complex process. How did you guys living in the woods with no machinery and no technology come up with this very carefully, formulated formula to create ayahuasca and then have this DMT thing go on? And they said, the plants told us.
Yeah.
And you hear that also in Native American stories. And then also me as a person who holds a degree in integrative health medicine with a focus on herbal medicine, I've read that same story from multiple cultures, including the Chinese culture, Chinese herbalists as well. They all say that in the Vedic medicine, Ayurveda, as me as a yogic practitioner. And so all of these things are things that are part of this PK, and so we're going to explore them at this event.
And, especially the idea of that duality of being, not being, like you were saying, the idea of the matrix, the idea of bending the spoon. And I've got in my hand right now the actual spoon that I bent on the remote viewing cruise. And I've tried before in my life, and this is no cheap spoon. Like, this is an actual restaurant quality weight to it spoon. And it blew my mind because it was Angela Thompson Smith who basically just talked me through that. We were sitting there and we were talking. She was like, no, just hold the spoon. And, as you hold it, tell the spoon that you recognize that it's there, that you're part of the spoon and the spoon's part of you, and that you love the spoon. And like, as we sat there, and then she told a story about her childhood, and I had heard the story on my show before. There were some other people who hadn't. And as she told it, I literally just felt it like turn to butter almost and just move. And I was just holding it on both ends. I wasn't rubbing it in the middle or anything like that. I was just holding it on both ends and slightly pushing to the inside. That was it, just with the intention that she was telling me about. And it blew my mind when it happened.
Wow.
And I had seen the spoon bending, all right? And don't get me wrong. Again, I had seen the spoon bending. I wasn't able to bend a spoon in Menlo Park or anything like that when I saw people come out with bent spoons, stuff like that. When I saw videos of people bending spoons, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until I bent the spoon So I grasp it. I get the idea of that being your own barrier in that kind of way, being your biggest stumbling block.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I think the one of the true lessons of PK, as well as all of these other psi abilities, but PK is that you recognize the truth of that we're connected with everything, the web of connection, and that we aren't separate from the things around us. And so we grow up in a world thinking we have to physically manipulate things in order to make it happen, not realizing the true, connectivity that lies deep within each of us as these multidimensional beings who are, in a way, superpositioned in all of those, what we call in yoga, the gross, subtle, and causal plane. We kind of exist in all three at the same time, but we fool ourselves into believing that we're only one at one particular time. Like, I am this physical body in this plane right now, and the only way for me to get to the next level is to die. And then I move over,
Yeah.
And then everything else is just a bunch of, micro expressions that I pick up on and little bit of data that comes in here and there. And that's what it is. And not recognizing that we are the whole and the whole is us at the same time.
What was the moment for you, Hakim, that you realized, even amongst your ninjutsu training, things like that, at what point did it crystallize for you that there was something different going on? That there was a connection to something that you hadn't felt connection to before, and that what you were keying into was real?
Yeah. So I had 3 major instances in my life, and when I in the same age bracket, it was between 8 and 9, that only became impactful to me really when I got older and I started learning more about the esoteric and the spiritual. And I think I read a book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and that was like what really. And then later I read Celestine Prophecy, and all those things.
Yeah.
It really started to take me into this other realm, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, this thing happened. So I'll tell you really quickly. One man came clear way later in life, but the first 2 that were really important is that when I was in that 8 and 9 time frame, it was more around 9. I told my mom I had a dream of, the lottery numbers. And I woke up and my mom would play the lotto, and I told her what the numbers were, and she played them locally, and they came out nationally. So if she had played them nationally, we would have won like $1 bazillion, but she didn't. And that was one lesson. And that she knew something was up with me. And then I was like, oh man, but I was still too young to really like kind of, figure that out. And I didn't have anyone guiding me saying, hey, this is a gift that you need to pay attention to. And like, it was just kind of like, oh, that was close. Okay, cool. You got something going on with you. And then we didn't talk about it again. The second thing that happened in around that same time frame, I was going to a school, St. Rocco's, and we went outside and we were playing in this, concrete, asphalt playground, and it was in New Jersey. And we were all lined up, and they was doing like kind of like it wasn't really baseball because it wasn't teams. It was just like each person comes up to bat and you get to hit the ball, and somebody catches it and he passes it to the pitcher again, and a new person comes up and they get to hit. So we all get to hit, right? So it was all really just hitting practice basically, or hitting fun. And so I remember I was leaning on the gate. I'm like third in line. No, I'm second in line. And this guy, he drops the bat on the ground, and it was a wet day, and he picks up the bat, and I just remember, I still to this day, I feel it when I say this story. I heard in my soul that I needed to move. So without hesitation, without questioning it, I just get out of line. I move like 2 people down, and they're kind of like weirded out because they're like, "Why would you move?" You know, like you were second. You know, you were like
you're next up.
This is next up, right? And so I was like, I didn't say anything, but you could see it in their face that everybody was confused, and I was confused. I don't know why I moved, but I had to move. The batter swings the bat, misses the ball. The bat slides out of his hand, flies, and it hits the person in the head who took my spot. And all I see is massive blood running down his face, screaming and hollering, and all these people come to his aid, and it was just crazy. And I remember that so vividly. And I was so young that it wasn't really like, I mean, what do you say?
Yeah.
Something told me to move because I guess I knew that was going to happen. And then you sound like a weird, crazy kid, right? So I never said that to anyone until later in my life when I got older and I recognized that it was a thing. Like it was something that really happened. And I didn't just make it up. It wasn't make believe. That something really guided me to move out of that spot. And those were some of my first earliest remembrances of that there was something there.
Wow. And what an amazing story just to have that visceral moment of something so impactful that even if that, like, those are memories that stick with you, even if you didn't have that moment of revelation tied to it, you know, and that's honestly one of my favorite things about Psy Games is the idea of bringing children in and allowing them to experience some of the talent, some of I mean, my son took place in the kids' room this year learning mind sight, and we still do it here and there. You know, we're still working with him, but he absolutely loved it. And the idea of instilling in a child that what they are feeling and what they're drawn to in that kind of way shouldn't be foreign. You know, that when you feel something in your gut, you should be able to trust that. You know, I think that is one of the most important things in the world to teach any child. The fact of like, no, trust your gut. You know, above all else, when your gut says get out of the way, get out of the way.
Yeah.
You know, that should not be a strange thing for our children to know or think about. That should be a guttural thing that we teach them to obey beyond everything else.
Yes, I 100% agree. And that's, like you said, that's what we're trying to do with the Psy Games. Psy Games was meant to be cross-generational. And the idea is that we can touch base with, you know, the present generation who is like, you know, in yoga, we call it the different stages of life. So we have, you know, the sunrise stage, and we have the midday stage, and then we have the sunset stage. Right. And so, when you go to a lot of conferences, you have a lot of people in the sunset stage, right? Where they're in their 40s and, you know, and beyond. So, and then this midday stage or this day like aspect would be like, you know, somewhere between the teens, like 20 and 40, you know, and then before that you have the sunrise stage, and that's this from the day you're born to about 18, 20. And so when you go to these conferences, you very rarely see anybody in the sunrise stage. You see very few people in the midday stage, you know, and you see a lot of people in that sunset stage. And that's not how we're going to keep this moving forward.
Yeah.
For the next generation.
Yep.
We need all those stages in one place. We need the elders to teach us. We need the people in between as the torch carriers and the holders of the space who help pass the knowledge on to the young generation. and then the young generation do the same, you know, when they become the midday stage generation. So that's really important. And we really need to be focused on that if we want to change things. I mean, face it, I've talked to several different high level people. I met one lady who was hired by Google to specifically come up with the protocol and understanding of what it means to have human beings flourish, because the Google and several other companies recognize that we will have 60 to 80% of the jobs gone in the next few years when AI and robotics converge in a major way, as they have been with Optimus and Boston Robotics and all these different robots. And they start taking jobs. And then people say to themselves, well, if in a culture where we were all raised that what we do is who we are, what happens when I have no more purpose?
Yeah.
You know? And so then I think this is a really good time for us to have the freedom to evolve to the next stage. People talk about, well, financial freedom is being able to do what you want when you want. And most people don't have that. So they're never really able to enjoy or explore their full life until it's retirement. And then at that stage, everything hurts and you're tired and you don't want to go out anymore.
Yeah.
So really, how can I, retire early? You know, I think the young folks have FIRE now. What is it? Something retire early. So it's like, so it's like FIRE now or something like that. It's just this real cool acronym. But, people are now wanting to retire early so that they can really enjoy these things. And I think that when it comes to us evolving, to our higher states, that really being free to do that is very important. And so if my daughter, who's now 1 and, she's 13 months, is going to be able to really enjoy and grow, then I need to teach her something that is going to allow her to really focus on the development of her multidimensionality to the next stage, to where we are such evolved beings that this idea of having to get money or any of this stuff is no longer there.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, once again, that freeing moment where you can understand, that you have a purpose beyond that job to begin with, that you have a connection to something larger than yourself beyond that job to begin with, is a huge thing. And I think that is the source of so many issues across the board in so many different communities, man. And, the example I give is myself. Whenever I walk into conventions and things like that, and people are, come here. And it's like, hey, I am not the young buck that you should be looking to recruit. Like, I am 50 years old. I'm on your coattails on the way out the door, researcher. Yeah. You should be finding, and I hold up our good friend Ryan Edwards right down the road in San Antonio in the world of cryptozoology. He is like a 27-year-old with like 4 books under his belt. That's the future of the research. It's good to see 27-year-olds picking up these mantles and learning from good people and learning from people like Dr. Meldrum and getting in touch with them, stuff like that, because that's what carries this research forward. If we keep it in the sunset category, like you're saying, then it goes when they go. And I think especially when it comes, once again, to the psych community, when it comes to things like remote viewing, that kind of stuff, I have said and held for a long time amongst all of the paradisciplines out there, paranormal research, parapsychological research, UFO, UAP, all of it, that there is a wider breadth and body of actual scientific research into the world of psi-ability than anything else.
Indeed.
Actual metric science, and people don't believe me, Hakim, and it's wild to think that, but it's it's absolutely true. Feel free to look it up, folks. Once again, people like Pear Labs, all kinds of stuff have been doing these things for years, literally decades. This research has been going on. So it's great. And in the last few minutes, let's talk about that real quick. Some of the ways that these things are measured, some of the ways that, you get quantifiable results at Games, because I think that's one of the most important parts, is that there are quantifiable results there.
Yeah. And you're right about that. I want to make sure that I say it, because it came to me while you were talking. It's financial independence, retire early. That's what FIRE stands for.
There you go.
But yeah, we have a lot of our games are developed where we already know what the standards are to succeed beyond statistical significance. In the way we make sure that people have the ability, as we use Games Online, to pre-screen our folks, because it's all automated and it's non-biased, and it already has the science built into it.
Yeah.
So if a person is going to basically come and want to participate as a perceptualist at the Games, they have to go through these tests. And once they score high enough in these tests, then they essentially, we have their stats for them being above statistical significance. And what that allows us to do is that allows us to give grace if they come to the event and they don't do so well, because sometimes, like everything, like I could be the world's greatest basketball player, and some days I'm not going to perform well. Doesn't mean I'm not a great basketball player. Just means on that day I didn't do so well. But in this field, people will use that really quickly to say that this doesn't exist and it's fake and blah, 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 and all of the things. And that's not really fair, when we think about it. But, it is to them. So, what we do at the Games is we try to have this perfect blend of technology and the micro and the macro, the technology, and then also the hard, material aspect. So with the Psychokinesis game, for instance, we had the Eggley wheel, which was a machine that was non-biased. It either would move one way or the other. And we had a software tell the perceptualist, make the Eggley wheel turn clockwise within 2 minutes. And they had 2 minutes to try to make the wheel turn clockwise. And then it would say, okay, great. Now make the Eggley wheel stop. And you have 2 minutes to make it stop. So now it's spinning and somehow you got to get this thing stop. And so it's not a human saying it, is non-biased. And then, we already had kind of the stats figured out on like, what are the chances that a person can make this turn right and then make it stop and then make it turn left on command. And that's really where it is. Because people will say all the time that, it's the heat or it's this thing. And I'm just like, okay, that's great.
They're breathing on it.
You're breathing on it. Yeah. So how are you going to do that on demand when I say it and it's inside a box? And the only thing that's in that box is your hands. I had somebody try to debate with me that somehow air was circulating through the room, going down the person's hand into the box and moving the wheel. And I said, okay, well, I'm willing to play your game. That's great. What's your explanation for when the system said, now make it stop and not move? And people were able to do it. And then the system said, make it go counterclockwise now. And then people were able to make that happen. So now you're saying, are you saying they're controlling the wind?
Yeah.
Now
which would still be a psi ability.
Exactly. That's my point. If you're saying that they're controlling the wind on command, then that's, aerokinesis. So so it is what it is. We have to just keep growing. And that really is the thing. And eventually, some of the naysayers will come around and the other ones will just be what they are. And that's okay too. I respect people have different opinions.
Absolutely.
And that they're willing to voice those opinions. That's freedom of speech. As a soldier, that's something that I fought for. So I'm cool with that, So, but I also would love to challenge anybody who says that this is anything other to come and be a perceptualist at the Side Games. Go through the process. Tell me how easy the process is and how high you're able to score, and then get on stage and be able to do it.
And I would invite the same to any scientist, Hakim. Anybody from any research institute, things like that. You feel free to come with measurement devices, whatever.
Yeah.
Like come witness it, come see it, come talk to people, put nodes on their brain in a lab. Like you'll find the people to do it with at this event, guaranteed. Even if you are of the scientific mind that this is not a thing and you need to prove it, you feel free to come and try to disprove it. Because I think you would be more than challenged. I got goosebumps more than once at that show, even while I was commenting on the dowsing event, man. Some of the results, some of the things that happened in that room throughout those days was absolutely phenomenal to witness. And it is one of those, like, if you're like, well, I got to see it to believe it. There's your chance, folks. I'm here to tell you there is some amazing stuff going on, and the things that you have put together just in the last couple of years to make this happen are amazing. And I'm glad that you are continuing it. I'm glad that you're growing it. I'm glad that you are having international, because it is international, Side Games International, but you're having international exhibitions and things like that where you are inviting other people and going abroad and bringing this abroad to help test people locally and things like that, to bring them into Side Games as an international part. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we, when it comes down to some of the abroad things, we're in talks right now that maybe we will do a Side Games event in Spain, and then in 2027, and then we are definitely doing one in 2027 in Manchester. So next year we'll be moving to a true international, but we've also invited people from everywhere. This year we have Dr. Simon Duan coming, and he was a he used to be the vice president of the Chinese Parapsychological Association. He was the first vice president. And then he went and got his PhD at Cambridge, and he stayed in the UK, and he has been studying psi research and phenomenon for the past 25 years. So he is an amazing resource, and he is in talks with some folks right now in China who he knows that he did research with, to come over and be perceptualists in this year's Side Games.
Cool.
So kids and adults, which is going to be fantastic. Last year we had people from Brazil, we had people from the UK, we had people from Australia compete. We have people coming from everywhere, and this is really what we want. And then we may have Side Games where we're doing these Side Games experiences, which are like exhibitions.
Yeah.
And anyone who has an event who wants us to come and provide that service where we can give people that mini Side Games experience, we can do that too. So we can come and set up for like a day or a half a day or just a couple hours, depending on what people ask for. And we can create an experience that's a mini Side Games experience at their event. And we can get people measured, and we can get to show them their data and all that stuff. So yeah, it's going to be a fantastic time in these upcoming months and years of how fast we're going to grow and how fast we're going to expand. My goal is by, so 2026 will be our second year, 27 our third, 28 our fourth. By 2029, I want to have a Psi Olympics in which we ask all of these different countries to send, the people who scored the best. And then we're just going to have a fun free for all in one location with all of the different countries. I want to see this expand into Australia, into the UK, into Spain, into Japan, into China. These are the and into India as well. So these are some of the main places that I really want to see starting to get this and starting to thrive around this scope.
absolutely amazing, man. What an amazing, amazing vision. And the fact that you have already got the legs underneath it that you have is beautiful. And the fact that you are already out doing these training programs, doing these intensives like you are doing here in Austin, I'm so excited that you guys are doing this stuff, because once again, there are numerous different things you can do online, stuff like that, folks. But I challenge you to find a psychokinesis training weekend, especially an intensive like this, where it is numerous days in person, learning these principles, learning the history of it. Because yes, I think learning the history of it is part of really the origami key that helps unlock the mind to the possibilities, Hakim. It really is. It's the idea that, like, it's not just a lock, it's an origami lock, man. And you really gotta undo what society has told you is fully impossible when it's actually fully a part of our nature to do so. So I want to thank you so much for your time, as always. I know how busy you are, not just with the planning of this, but with life, the wife, the kid, business, everything else. It's always great talking with you. My fingertips are always tingling whenever we're done, which is how I know it was a good conversation. Before we let you go, let everybody know where they can go to find out more about the Psychokinesis training program coming up here in Austin, March 12th through the 16th, where they can go to find out more about Psy Games and to begin their journey with Psy Games, to begin doing the online Psy Games, things like that, and possibly getting themselves in as a perceptualist.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, the way to find out about the Psychokinesis event is that you would just go to the PsyGamesInternational.com website, and then you would just go over to Learn, right? In that top, you scroll down to that top tab, and it talks about PK training program, and that's how they would get there, and they can register. We actually only have 6 more slots, which is pretty amazing.
Awesome.
So please, if anybody's interested in doing it, they can sign up. And I will also pass on a discount code for you so that they can get 10% off if they go to it through your through this interview. And that would be also really cool as well.
Well, absolutely, man. We would love to be able to help you out with that and be able to do that. We'll definitely tag that in the show notes, all kinds of stuff. So anything that we can do always to help support this and get it out to a larger audience, that is what we are here for. Because, man, this is, once again, I think a huge part of our human conversation in the next 5 to 10 years. It really is. There is, as Art Bell used to say, there is a quickening going on, and it has rapidly snowballed in the last few years when it comes to humanity, our connection, the way that things are operating, the way that we influence each other, even in a global aspect. So I am of the mind, the more you can get in touch with yourself, the more you're in touch with the world around you. And once you learn that barrier is minuscule, if even existent, beyond anything except your mind, that the world is your oyster. Anything can happen at that point. So I want to thank you for all your efforts with this and in helping change the literal vibration of humanity to ring in that universal chord that we're all supposed to be in. So thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate you. And this is always a pleasure. And I'm glad that we're doing all of the things together. We're really going to make something amazing.
It's fantastic. Hold the line real quick while we close things out with the audience for this segment. While you are online, everybody, checking out all of the amazing things from PsyGamesInternational.com and registering yourself for the Psy Games training program, stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can like, follow, subscribe. That's where you can find all of our links to great events like Psy Games, as well as our videos section, where you can find our YouTube channel, where you can watch all of our interviews from events like Psy Games as well. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time tonight. Thank you for your open hearts, your open minds. That is what makes the conversation, and without the conversation, humanity does not march forward. So remember, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. To download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault, or become a sponsor of Curious Realm, visit our website at curiousrealm.com. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast and video services, curiousrealm.com, as well as KGRA Radio, APRTV, and the official Curious Realm app for Roku devices. Curious Realm is a proud member of the Ground Zero Media family of podcasts. For more shows and members-only content, visit groundzeroplus.com today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and remember, the other side is always watching.